The sun hung low over the hills of Ntanso, painting the clay roads gold. The air smelled of dust, cocoa leaves, and evening smoke from cooking fires. The village buzzed softly with the rhythm of life. Women returning from the fields, children chasing each other barefoot, and drums echoing faintly from somewhere down the road. Among it all walked Kweku Minsa, a man who carried the city in his stride. His shirt was crisp, his shoes too clean for the red earth beneath them, and his mind, sharp as the metal ruler in his architect's case. He had returned from Accra to oversee a large housing project, a promise of modern life in the heart of tradition. To him, this was progress, his gift to the village that had raised him. But to many, including his mother, it was a disruption. Mama Efua, his aging mother, watched from her veranda as he passed by. Her eyes were kind but heavy with worry. Beads hung around her neck, and the smoke from burning herbs curled around her like a silent prayer. "He has forgotten," she whispered to herself. "He walks with pride, not listening to the earth anymore." Every night, she knelt before her small altar, whispering her prayers to the ancestors. She asked them not for riches, but for humility to touch her son's heart again. A mind too modern for the old ways. Kweku had always been different. As a boy, he questioned every tale about spirits and prophecies. As a man, he dismissed them completely. He believed the world belonged to reason, not rituals. When the elders warned him that his construction site was too close to the sacred grove, he laughed. "Trees don't get offended, Uncle Kojo," he said, smiling as he drew lines across his blueprint. "This is a new era. We're building homes, not shrines." He saw their worried faces and felt a strange pride in his logic. He told himself the village needed saving. From fear, from superstition, from themselves. The gathering. That evening, the village gathered in the central square. Lamps flickered in the humid air. Drums fell silent as old Nana Ya, the village seer, was helped forward. Her body was frail, but her voice carried like the wind. "Something dark follows this man," she said, pointing a trembling hand toward Kweku. "The blood of arrogance will call its own shadow." The crowd gasped. Heads turned. Kweku stood tall, his smile calm but mocking. "And how much for this prophecy, Nana Ya? 1 goat or 2? Laughter rippled through the younger men behind him. But the elders were silent. They looked at him the way one looks at a child who does not yet understand the fire he plays with. Nana Ya's eyes narrowed, her tone rising. "You laugh now, son of Efua, but when it knocks at your door, do not pretend you never heard it." A sudden gust of wind swept through the square, blowing out half the lamps. The darkness pressed close, and for a heartbeat, the world went still. Even Kweku felt it, a cold prickle on his skin. Then the laughter returned, and he joined it. "Enough of this nonsense," he said, brushing the dust from his shirt. "I have real work to do, a mother's prayer." Later that night, Mama Efua sat outside her hut, clutching her rosary of beads, whispering names of ancestors into the dark. "Watch him," she prayed. "He walks with blind eyes. Show him mercy before it's too late." Far away, in his modern bungalow on the edge of the village, Kweku leaned against his glass window, watching the moon rise. The night was calm, silent, ordinary. He chuckled softly to himself. "When it knocks," he murmured, shaking his head. "Superstitious nonsense." But outside, unseen by him, the wind shifted. A single leaf from the forbidden grove fluttered across the compound and landed gently at his doorstep. And though he couldn't hear it, something, somewhere, knocked once. Very softly. Morning came with the smell of wet earth and the sound of hammers. Kweku Minsa stood in the middle of the construction site, wearing a white helmet and a proud smile. Around him, young men worked with energy, mixing cement, lifting blocks, following his sharp instructions. "We're not just building homes," he told them. "We're building a future." To the workers, Kweku was impressive, a man from the city who spoke with confidence and carried a vision. But to the elders watching from the distance, there was something unsettling in his certainty. They whispered among themselves, glancing toward the edge of the site, toward the old grove, where tall trees swayed like ancient watchers. A clash of worlds. By noon, Kweku ordered a crew to move a small shrine that stood near the edge of the new road. It was made of stones, clay, and old bottles filled with palm oil. "Clear this up," he said, pointing. "We'll put the drainage line through here." The workers hesitated. "But, sir, this place is sacred," one of them murmured. Kweku frowned. "Sacred or not, progress doesn't wait for myths." When no one moved, he grabbed a shovel himself and struck the ground. The sound echoed, strangely, dull, heavy, almost like a heartbeat. The villagers, watching from a distance, crossed themselves and walked away quietly. Later that evening, the shrine was gone, and the tree that shaded it, known as the Forbidden Tree, lay chopped into pieces beside the road. Unsettling signs. For a few days, all seemed well. The project moved forward. The air filled with the sound of progress, laughter, metal, and dreams. But small, unexplainable things began to happen. Blueprints on Kweku's desk changed overnight. Walls shifted, measurements warped, entire drawings smeared into strange shapes. He blamed humidity, or perhaps one of the workers touching his papers. Then, one morning, he arrived at the site and froze. A carved ancestral mask lay on his work table, its hollow eyes staring at him. He recognized it. It belonged to the shrine they'd torn down. "Who put this here?" he barked. No one answered. The crew swore they hadn't touched it. Kweku tossed the mask into a box and told himself it was just a prank. But deep inside, something cold stirred in his chest. The dream. That night, exhaustion took him quickly. He drifted into a dream, one that felt too real to be imagination. He was standing at his front door. The night outside was pitch black. He could hear the wind breathing like a living thing. Then came 3 slow knocks on the door. Knock, knock, knock. He opened it. A shadow stood there, tall, faceless, but shaped like him. Its voice was a whisper of air and sand. "I warned you." He tried to speak, but the sound died in his throat. The shadow reached out a hand that looked like smoke and light and touched his chest. He woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The room was quiet, except for his pounding heart. He stared at the door. It was shut tight. "Just a dream," he muttered, rubbing his face. "Just stress." But as he turned away, his eyes caught something faint on the wood. 3 dark smudges like fingerprints. A mother's plea. The next morning, Mama Efua came to visit. She entered his house with the calm grace of age, holding a small calabash bowl filled with herbs. "The ancestors are restless," she said softly. "You have stirred what should not be touched. Let Nana Ya cleanse the land." Kweku smiled tightly. "Mother, please, don't start. These things you call spirits are just stories. I'm building homes, not fighting ghosts." But her eyes did not move from his face. Stories keep men alive when pride cannot. He sighed and turned away, brushing her concern aside like dust. Footprints. That evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Kweku walked across his compound to lock the gate. Something caught his eye. Footprints. Deep, wet footprints leading straight to his front door. But the ground was dry. There had been no rain for days. He followed the prints backward, but they stopped halfway across the yard, as if the person had simply appeared from nowhere. A slow unease crawled up his spine. He told himself it must be some prank from the workers. But when he looked again, the prints were gone. The night grew heavy with silence. Far away, the dogs began to bark, one after another, until the whole village echoed with their voices. Kweku stood at his window, watching the darkness move. For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Not fear exactly, but a strange, tightening dread. The villagers said the spirits were restless. He told himself they were just afraid of change. Yet somewhere deep down, beneath all his logic, a small voice whispered, "What if they're right?" He pushed the thought away and turned off the lights. But outside, the wind began to rise again, and in the dark, something unseen walked past his window, leaving no footprints this time. The wind had changed. For days, the air over Ntanso felt thick, too still, too heavy, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. The villagers said the land was angry, that the ancestors whispered through the rainless nights. Kweku laughed at the talk. But even his workers had grown uneasy. Fewer of them came each morning. Some refused to return at all. Still, Kweku pushed on. The work must continue, he said, forcing a smile. But deep down, sleep no longer brought rest. The dreams were back. The door, the knocking, the shadow. Always the same. The storm. It began on a Sunday afternoon. The sky, clear that morning, turned black without warning. The air filled with dust, leaves, and the wild sound of thunder. The villagers ran for shelter, but Kweku refused to leave the construction site. "It's just rain," he shouted over the wind. "We're not afraid of weather." But as he spoke, a strange sound rose within the storm, a low hum like distant chanting. The workers froze. Then, with a sound like tearing metal, one of the half-built houses collapsed. The wooden beams split, stones cracked, and the earth trembled beneath their feet. When the storm passed, Kweku stood among the ruins, drenched and shaking with anger. "Who built this?" he demanded. "Whose mistake caused this?" But the foreman swore no one had touched that section all day. "We heard voices, sir," one of the men whispered. Voices in the wind. Kweku dismissed them, but the words clung to him. Voices in the wind. As he walked home through the muddy road, he felt the storm had left something behind, something watching. 3 knocks. That night, the house was silent. Power was out. The air smelled faintly of burnt wood and damp dust. Kweku sat alone, candlelight flickering across his face as he stared at his drawings. He reached for his pen and froze. There, across the page, written in dark, shaky ink, were 3 words, "I warned you." He dropped the pen, heart pounding. The writing wasn't his. Or was it? His own signature curved just below the words. He stood quickly, knocking the chair backward. That's when it came. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, hollow taps on the door. Kweku's chest tightened. "Who's there?" he called out. No answer. He grabbed a flashlight and walked toward the door, each step echoing through the quiet house. The knocking came again, softer this time, but closer, almost inside the walls. He yanked the door open. No one stood there. Only the smell of wet earth and the sound of dripping water from the roof. His light caught something on the doorstep. Muddy footprints leading away into the darkness. He stepped outside, his breath visible in the cold air. The village was asleep, but the night felt alive, whispering, shifting. When he turned back toward the house, the door creaked open wider, though no wind blew. He shut it hard, bolted it, and stood still for a long time. The message from the city. The next morning, Kweku received a phone call from Accra. The voice on the other end trembled. "Sir, I'm sorry to tell you this. Your old partner, Daniel Owusu, he's dead. Fell from his balcony last night. They say it was an accident." Kweku's hand went cold around the phone. Daniel, the same man who used to mock the village beliefs with him. He'd laughed at Nana Yatu years ago when she'd warned them about playing with shadows. The coincidence felt too sharp, too close. That evening, Kweku drove to Nana Ya's hut. The villagers avoided his eyes as he passed. The seer's warning. Nana Ya sat by a fire, her thin frame wrapped in colorful cloth. She didn't look surprised to see him. "You came late," she said quietly. "The door is already open." "I don't believe in your door, Nana," Kweku said, trying to sound firm, but his voice shook. "I just need to understand." She turned toward him, her eyes clouded but knowing. "Understand? The living do not build where the dead still breathe. You disturbed the covenant of the land. The shadows you mocked have found your scent." He stepped back. "You're saying this is my fault?" "Fault is a word for men. To the spirits, it is only balance." She looked beyond him, her voice low and final. "You cannot close it now. Not with words, not with prayers. The door between worlds has heard your name." Kweku left in silence, the firelight flickering behind him like the last breath of reason. The breaking point. Days passed. Kweku stopped eating. He barely slept. He caught glimpses of movement in mirrors, figures standing behind him that disappeared when he turned. Sometimes he'd find fog forming across the glass, though the air was dry. Once he saw words appear in the mist. "We are coming." His mother found him one morning slumped over his desk, skin pale, eyes hollow. She touched his forehead, burning hot. "Kweku," she whispered. "You must listen now. You must." He muttered in a daze, "Someone's coming for me. The visitor." That night, rain began to fall for the first time in weeks, soft at first, then heavy and relentless. Kweku lay in bed, half awake, heart pounding. Then knock, knock, knock. He sat up slowly. The sound came again, louder this time. The door trembled. He stood, every muscle tense, and stepped into the hallway. "Who's there?" No answer, only the hum of the rain outside. He reached for the handle. His hand shook. When he opened the door, lightning flashed, revealing a figure standing there. It was him, or something like him, older, thinner, its eyes sunken and empty. The rain fell through its body as though it wasn't solid. It raised one hand and knocked once more, slow, deliberate. Knock! Kweku's scream cut through the thunder as the candlelight blew out. The rain did not stop for 3 days. It washed through the streets, filling the ditches and fields, swallowing the road to Kweku's land. The villagers said the ancestors were cleansing the ground, purging what had been awakened. No one went near the construction site anymore. The workers had vanished, their tools left where they dropped them. Only silence remained, broken by the hiss of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Inside his house, Kweku sat alone, drenched, trembling, and half lost between worlds. The knock, the figure, the voice, they replayed in his head until every sound in the dark felt like a warning. The house that watched. On the 4th night, the lights flickered back on, but Kweku wished they hadn't. The walls seemed to breathe with shadows. Every reflection showed something slightly wrong, a movement where none should be, a pair of eyes watching too long. He covered every mirror, but the reflections persisted, shimmering faintly on windows, spoons, even puddles on the floor. At times he'd hear whispers in a can, his grandmother's language, though he hadn't spoken it in years. "We are not strangers, Kweku. You opened the way. The debt must be paid." He shouted for them to stop, slamming his fists against the walls until the noise faded. But always came back, soft and patient, like a lullaby from the grave. Sleep was no refuge. Each time his eyes closed, he dreamed of the figure at the door, his own face staring back at him, mouth unmoving, yet whispering secrets he couldn't unhear. The call to return. On the 7th morning, the rain stopped. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of wet soil. Kweku woke with a single thought carved into his mind: go back to the site. He didn't know why, only that something there was unfinished, something calling him back. He dressed in silence, ignoring his mother's pleas not to leave. She stood in the doorway, clutching a Bible, tears in her eyes. "Kweku, please. You are not well. If I don't go, it won't end," he murmured. "I have to face it." The road to the construction site was half flooded, littered with branches and debris. The half-built foundations rose from the mud like tombstones. When he reached the place where the first house had collapsed, he saw it. The same carved stone that Nana, Yao once used to bless the land. It was cracked clean through, blackened like something had burned it from within. He knelt beside it, rainwater soaking his knees. The symbol of protection was gone, replaced by deep grooves, words written in a language he couldn't read. As he stared, the air grew colder. A sound began, faint, rhythmic, like drumming from under the ground. And then a voice. "You were warned." Kweku's breath caught. "Who's there?" No answer, only the sound of footsteps behind him. He turned, nothing. He turned back, and the stone was gone. The mirror beneath the earth. The next moments blurred into nightmare. The ground beneath him began to sink, slow but steady, pulling him into the wet earth. He tried to run, but his legs felt heavy, as though the mud had turned to hands gripping his ankles. Lightning flashed. The world flickered, and suddenly, he wasn't standing on the site anymore. He was underground. The air shimmered like glass. The soil walls glowed faintly with symbols, hundreds of them, pulsing softly. In front of him stood a wide, dark pool of water that reflected the world above, the mirror between realms. He stepped closer, trembling. In the reflection, he saw his house, his mother, the village, and behind all of it, figures moving slowly, cloaked in smoke and flame. "Who are you?" he whispered. From the water, a voice rose, his own. "We are what you denied." The reflection shifted. His face melted away, replaced by that same shadowed version of himself. The reflection reached toward him from beneath the water. He stumbled back, heart racing, but the hand caught his wrist. It was cold, firm, and real. "The prophecy does not wait for belief," the voice said. "You laughed at what you should have feared. Now fear must teach you to listen." Kweku screamed and tore his arm free. The hand dissolved into mist. The pool turned black. When he looked again, he was alone, standing once more at the construction site, drenched and shaking, his clothes covered in mud. But on his arm, where the reflection had grabbed him, 3 black marks had appeared, shaped like knocks. Knock, knock, knock. The whispering walls. That night, Kweku locked every door and window. He turned off every light. Still, the knocking continued. Not from the door this time, but from inside the walls. He tore at the plaster, shouting for it to stop. Beneath the layers of paint, he found old drawings, ancestral symbols, faint but unmistakable. His grandmother had painted them decades ago, long before he rebuilt the house. He fell to his knees, sobbing. "I didn't mean to open it. I didn't mean." The whispers softened. "It is not meaning that binds you, child," they said. "It is blood." He realized then that this wasn't just about the land or the prophecy. It was his lineage. His ancestors had made a vow long ago, and he had broken it. By mocking the prophecy, by disturbing the sacred ground, he had reopened the ancient passage his forefathers had sealed. The descent of a shadow. Near midnight, the storm returned. The lights flickered once more, and this time did not come back. Kweku stood before the door, his body trembling. From outside came a now familiar rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. He didn't move, didn't breathe. Then knock, knock, knock. Louder, closer. The walls shook. The air thinned. The floorboards groaned as something pressed from the other side. Finally, the door burst open, not from wind, but from darkness. A thick, rolling shadow poured into the room, swallowing the light, swallowing sound, swallowing everything. In that darkness, a figure emerged, the mirror self. It smiled. "Now," it said softly, "you will remember what was forgotten." And as the shadow reached him, Kweku felt himself falling. Not through air, but through time, through memory, through every life his bloodline had lived before him. He screamed as the door between worlds sealed shut behind him. The world was not dark, it was red. When Kweku opened his eyes, he was no longer in his home. The air shimmered like heat rising from desert sand, and the sky above pulsed crimson, alive with moving shadows. He stood on cracked earth, surrounded by trees that looked burned from within, glowing faintly, their branches whispering in a language older than sound. At first, he thought he was dreaming. Then he looked down and saw the marks on his arm, the 3 black knocks, now glowing with dull fire. The prophecy had not come to him. He had been pulled inside it, the land of echoes. A figure emerged from the haze, tall, draped in white cloth, face hidden by a wooden mask carved with ancient Adinkra symbols. Its voice was deep, layered, echoing as though spoken by many mouths. "Welcome, Kweku Minsa, son of the Laughing Blood. You come from those who mocked what they were meant to guard." Kweku stepped back. "Where am I? What do you want from me?" "Not want," the voice replied. "Remember." At its gesture, the sky split open like a torn curtain, revealing visions swirling above. His ancestors, farmers, hunters, midwives, gathered before a shrine of stone. A covenant being made. Blood poured onto the earth as they chanted in unison. "We bind our line to the guardianship of the threshold, that the dead may rest and the living may dream." The vision shifted. Centuries later, Kweku's grandfather broke that vow, selling sacred land to foreign builders, ignoring the warning of the elders. Since then, every generation had faced loss, madness, or death. And now it was Kweku's turn. The weight of legacy. The masked figure raised a hand, and Kweku felt the memories slam into him. His father's death, his grandmother's whispers, his own laughter when Nana Yao warned him. You carry the arrogance of your fathers, the voice said. But arrogance can become courage if it learns humility. Kweku dropped to his knees, gasping. I didn't know. I didn't know the truth. Knowing is a choice, the voice answered. And you chose not to listen. The ground beneath him rippled like water. From it rose the forms of his ancestors, dark silhouettes wrapped in smoke, their eyes burning faintly gold. Blood remembers, they said together, and blood demands balance. He felt their presence all around him, the pain, the wisdom, the weight of generations. And for the first time, Kweku didn't resist. He bowed low, pressing his forehead to the soil. Then tell me how to make it right. The trial of blood. The masked spirit circled him slowly. The door cannot be closed by denial. It must be sealed by sacrifice. What was opened with pride must be bound with surrender. Kweku's voice trembled. What do I have to give? Your laughter, said the spirit. Your disbelief. Your will to control what is sacred. You must return what your bloodline stole, faith. A blinding light filled the air. Before him appeared the mirror. The same black pool from beneath the earth. But now it reflected not his home, but his soul. In it, he saw himself, broken, trembling, but still defiant. Step through, the spirit commanded, and face yourself. Kweku hesitated. If I do, will I live? You will change. Whether that is living or dying, the blood will decide. He took a breath and stepped forward. The surface of the mirror rippled like oil and swallowed him whole. The Hall of Faces. He fell through darkness, landing in a vast circular chamber lined with mirrors. Each one showed a different version of himself. Younger, older, successful, ruined, all paths he could have lived. Some smiled, others glared with hatred. They whispered, "You built your life on denial. You mocked what your mother feared. You thought wealth could silence memory. You forgot us." Kweku screamed, "Stop!" But their voices grew louder until the chamber shook. Then one reflection, the darkest of all, stepped forward. It was the same shadowed twin who had knocked on his door. "I am what you became when you turned your back on truth," it said. "You feared the spirits, but the real ghost was your pride." The shadow reached into Kweku's chest, not to harm, but to pull something out, a flickering red light, beating weakly. His heart, but not of flesh, of spirit. "Do you accept what you are?" Kweku, shaking, whispered, "Yes." The shadow smiled. "Then remember, and be free." It pressed the light back into his chest. The mirrors shattered, filling the air with light. The return. When Kweku opened his eyes again, he was lying at the construction site, the sun rising over the soaked earth. His mother and several villagers stood nearby, weeping in disbelief. He sat up, dazed. His arm was clean, the black marks gone. The cracked stone beside him was whole again, glowing faintly with gold lines. Nana Ya approached slowly, her face unreadable. "You went where few return," she said softly. "And the door." Kweku looked toward the horizon. The land was still, peaceful. "Closed," he whispered. "For now." The cleansing. Over the next days, Kweku rebuilt what the storm had destroyed, not with ambition, but with reverence. He turned the land into a community garden, dedicating it to the ancestors. Every morning, he poured libation, whispering gratitude instead of demand. The villagers watched in awe. The same man who had once laughed at prophecy now bowed before it. And slowly, peace returned. The rains balanced, the crops grew, and the strange dreams faded. But sometimes, in the quiet of dusk, Kweku would hear a faint sound knock. Knock, knock. He never feared it again. Instead, he would smile, lift his head toward the fading light, and whisper, "I am listening."